You're listening to The Bible Guys, a podcast where a couple of friends talk about the Bible in fun and practical ways.
Here we are.
We are here.
Woohoo! I'm here.
I'm also right next to you.
Ready and raring to go.
Did you?
Oh yeah, I'm ready.
All right.
This is going to be amazing.
So we record five podcasts in one sitting. Mm-hmm. So this is our third podcast. So we always say, "Hey, yesterday," but in reality, when we say yesterday, it was like 5 minutes ago.
Yeah.
So I should say more accurately, we're still here.
We're still here.
Yes.
Yes.
So, hey, good morning or good evening, whenever you're listening. My name is Chris. He's Jeff. We're the Bible Guys. And we're going to start off today with a social media minute.
So, getting to interact with our listeners, right, is so much fun. And so let's just take this minute and give some shout outs. Here's what we have from John L. It says, I really enjoy your podcast series, and it helps me with my daily confrontations and hurdles. I got to jump. And hurdles, I got to jump.
Yes.
Yes, I see. Good job and very unique.
Very unique.
Very unique.
I'm going to take that as a super big compliment.
That's on the same level as very special.
Right.
Isn't that
yeah.
special?
Yeah, it feels like a comment.
Remember Dana Carvey? Isn't that special?
Yeah. Oh my goodness, that's a throwback.
That's a long one.
I was going to say very unique sounds like, and you still got your health.
Yes.
Hey, at least you got your health.
Yeah, at least you have your health.
No, I'm kidding. Thank you, John.
That's awesome,
L. That's really super great. Okay, so number 2, it says, really enjoy listening each morning. So many good points that I've tried to remember and put to use during my day. Keep up the great work, says Scott W.
Hey, Scott W.
And by the way, that's really, I just mentioned a moment ago that we come in, we record 5 in a row. Sometimes we do it twice a week. I mean, it's a lot of hours. But honestly, it's feedback like this that really encouraged me to continue to go on, because again, we're always surprised anybody listens.
Yeah, right.
Right. But at the same time, when somebody says, hey, I really do appreciate it. It starts me off with the Bible. I try to apply, for that day. That's really cool.
Yeah. And I mean, lately this has eaten up, like 8 hours of our week or whatever. So you do wonder, it doesn't matter. Should we do it? But I think it does. So here's one from Elizabeth L. It says, thank you guys so much for your podcast. It brings me so much peace, smiles, and such a humble feeling into a good day. I pray for you both so much and thank God for you both. Heritage rocks. Heritage is the church we pastor, by the way.
Yep.
By the way, my coffee ingredients now includes cream, sugar, and the Bible Guys sandwich. Ha ha ha. Consumption of knowledge. So there you go.
Oh, she's referring to the podcast as the sandwich.
Yes, that's right.
No, that's
right.
awesome.
So
at first I thought, I was honored because I thought, did she go to a shop that has a sandwich named after us?
The Bible Guy sandwich?
Yeah, wouldn't that be great?
We should solicit all the shops in the area.
Yeah. Remember that scene in Infinity Wars where they said there's an ice cream named after you, and the Hulk says, there is? And he says, yeah. And he goes, I prefer the Tony Stark ice cream or whatever. So anyway, so yeah, that'd be cool. The Bible Guy sandwich.
We had another one. Let me read this one. This one was really nice too. This was posted on Apple, by the way. So the Apple Podcast. I sent this to you the other day.
Oh yeah, that's right.
It says life-changing, 5 stars. Those are the only kind of reviews we want, by the way. Right. Just send us 5-star reviews. We don't want no 4-star reviews. Don't go halfway. 3 stars. Right. So it's 5-star review. It says, I'm just an Okie who's been a faithful listener for a couple of years now. Scripture can 100% change your life. Jeff and Chris do an outstanding job communicating God's word in a fun and informative way. I cannot begin to describe the impact these guys have had on me, which has trickled down to my family, my friends, and my coworkers. Chris and Jeff, if you're reading this, thank you. From the bottom of my reborn heart, thank you. Right? Isn't that amazing?
That almost made me cry.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So it makes it worth it.
Yeah.
To keep going and
that's very
keep
humbling.
doing these things.
Very humbling. Thank you.
Yeah. So thank you guys so much. You're
very
amazing.
Cool. All right. Well, enough of that, huh?
Yeah.
So let's go ahead and jump into
enough of that. Oh, it's almost like when we had to compliment each other, right? It is weird that we read compliments.
Yeah, right.
To us,
right. Hey, so let me take a minute and
tell you about all the people who think I'm so wonderful.
Yeah. Let me read this out loud. Chris is awesome. Chris is good looking. He's a stud. That's so funny.
Yeah, there you go. So I haven't seen that one yet.
No.
So
that one only exists inside my home. My wife would say it. In fact, Liz, why don't you write in a compliment like that? That'd be great. And that way Desiree can choose it, and then I could make a joke and say, I could read it and then say, oh, by the way, that's from my wife.
That's from my wife.
That'd be funny, actually. Right? Then Bonnie, if you're listening, go ahead and write one in for Jeff. That'd be pretty funny.
Bonnie would just say, you guys need to behave. That's what Bonnie would say.
Oh, hey, it'd be a really fun segment. I'll say this, and I know we got to go. I read one that says, Chris is so good looking, he's so great, whatever. And I'll say, and it's from my wife, everybody giggles. And then you read one, and it says, oh, Jeff's so great, he's so awesome. And it says, that's from Chad.
Or from my mom. That's what it would be.
Yeah, from your mom, yeah.
Hercules.
Yeah, right. So we pull the wool over everybody's eyes. They're expecting Bonnie, but it's somebody else.
Somebody else. Okay. So Matthew chapter 24, we're going to read these passages now. Some of you are going to be so excited.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, we should all be excited, Jeff.
Well,
it's the word of God.
Yeah. But I mean, there's some people that are particularly excited of all the things. Of all the things that Jesus said, there's some people that are really, really excited about these things.
Yeah, there are a group of people who are fascinated with end times things.
That's right. So what we're reading is Matthew chapter 24, 1 through 51, Mark 13, 1 through 37, and Luke 21, 5 through 38.
But not all today.
Not all today. Yeah. So what we're going to do is we're going to divide them into pieces because Jesus is teaching us about being watchful for his return, right? So we're supposed to be paying attention that he's going to return. And he's telling us now, this is what the world's going to be like when I come back. And because he takes so many verses to say it, we're just going to divide each of these passages in half, and then we'll spend the next several days unpacking them. And he says many of the same things, but in a lot of the passages, he says different things.
Yeah.
So, it's interesting. Yeah. Here we go. So we'll read the first 25 verses, is that correct?
Yep.
Of Matthew chapter 24.
Yep.
As Jesus was leaving the temple grounds, his disciples pointed out to him the various temple buildings. But he responded, do you see all these buildings? I tell you the truth, they will be completely demolished. Not one stone will be left on top of another. Later, Jesus sat on the Mount of Olives, and his disciples came to him privately and said, tell us, when will all this happen? What sign will signal your return and the end of the world? Jesus told them, don't let anyone mislead you, for many will come in my name, claiming I am the Messiah. They will deceive many, and you will hear of wars and threats of wars. But don't panic. Yes, these things must take place, but the end won't follow immediately. Nation will go to war against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. There will be famines and earthquakes in many parts of the world, but all this is only the first of the birth pains, with more to come. Then you will be arrested, persecuted, and killed. You'll be hated all over the world because you are my followers, and many will turn away from me and betray and hate each other. And many false prophets will appear and will deceive many people. Sin will be rampant everywhere, and the love of many will grow cold. But the one who endures to the end will be saved. And the good news about the kingdom will be preached throughout the whole world so that all nations will hear it, and then the end will come. The day is coming when you will see what Daniel the prophet spoke about, the sacrilegious object that causes desecration standing in the holy place. Reader, pay attention. Then those in Judea must flee to the hills. A person out on the deck of a roof must not go down into the house to pack. A person out in the field must not return even to get a coat. How terrible it'll be for pregnant women and for nursing mothers in those days. And pray that your flight will not be in winter or on the Sabbath, for there will be greater anguish than at any time since the world began, and it will never be so great again. In fact, unless that time of calamity is shortened, not a single person will survive, but it'll be shortened for the sake of God's chosen ones. Then, if anyone tells you, look, here is the Messiah, or there he is, don't believe it. For false messiahs and false prophets will rise up, perform great signs and wonders, so as to deceive, if possible, even God's chosen ones. See, I've warned you about this ahead of time. Ooh.
Yeah, see, none of this really sounds like good news.
No, it's not good news?
I mean...
You want me to find something else?
Yeah,
I'll look for something else.
Yeah, let's pop in a Disney movie or something.
Yes. Uh-huh. Good morning. Good morning.
That's funny. It is fascinating, of course, just as every other part of the scripture and everything that Jesus says is. But if somebody were to tell me, hey, you're going to have children and grandchildren, and you're going to watch and see them grow, and it's going to be great, I would say, man, I'm looking so much forward to that. But when somebody says, okay, let's go ahead and talk about all the horrible things that are in store for humanity before humanity ends, I'm not the type of personality, and again, I'm not busting on anybody who gravitates toward this at all. But like, there are people who are literally would spend hours a week trying to dissect current events on the news and attaching it to this, trying to figure out what bad parts of the news are attached to these predictions, which are, for the most part, pretty vague, right?
Yeah, sure.
I mean, some are specific, but not
wars have been happening for 2,000 years.
Yeah. Earthquakes, false messiahs for decades and decades, and probably even hundreds of years.
So Gene Mayhew was one of the elders at Heritage Church. He's helped found a couple different Bible colleges.
Yeah.
PhD, and he wrote a book about there were 20-something messiahs, 30-something messiahs, just in Jesus' day. All claiming to be the Messiah in and around the time of Jesus. Yeah. Right?
I was just going to say, there's been dozens just in our lifetime.
Yeah. People claiming to be the Son of God. Hey, we had a guy come to Heritage Church who told us he's the second Son of God.
Nice.
Yeah. He came in to let us know just in case we were interested.
In case we were interested.
Yeah. So, we're not looking for another one. We got one.
Yeah. Right.
We got the Messiah. But it happens sometimes. That people set it up. They begin to believe that they're a Messiah, or they're going to leverage their power in order to,
Anyway, I'm not trying to be a party pooper. I'm just saying, like, to try to figure out current events, which are catastrophe, filled or whatever, and to just spend all your time trying to attach those things. I get it. I get the motivation. The motivation is to
looking forward to Jesus' return.
Looking forward to Jesus' return, and more importantly, to warn people.
Right.
That's the motivation.
Yep.
So I get it.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, like, for me, I'm just like,
It's heavy.
It's heavy, man. It's heavy.
Well, let's jump right at the beginning, because he's at the temple.
Yeah.
Right. And he tells them. So they say, "Hey, you see all these buildings?" And Jesus, well, let me tell you, none of these stones will be still here. So if you know Jerusalem. If you've been there before, the only thing that's still left of the temple area is what's called the Temple Mount. It was a hill, and then they flattened off. Herod had flattened it off, filled it in, and he built like a retaining wall around the hill so that the platform where the temple would be built was sturdy and stable.
Yeah,
so
we see this today, right? Retention walls when you have to chop into a hill.
And so there's a note in here. It says, next to the inner temple, where the sacred objects were kept and sacrifices offered, there was a large area called the Court of the Gentiles, where the money changers and merchants had their booths. Outside these courts were long porches. Solomon's colonnade was 1,562 feet long.
Wow.
Right? So that's longer than a football field. Just this one piece. So when you get in your mind, just this one colonnade, this one walking area, was 1,562 feet long, decorated with 160 columns stretching along its 920-foot length. Gazing at this glorious and massive structure, the disciples found Jesus' words about its destruction difficult to believe. But the temple was indeed destroyed only 40 years later when the Romans sacked Jerusalem in AD 70. And Josephus describes it. So, have you ever read any of Josephus's stuff?
Yeah.
So Josephus was one of the historians that tell of this time. There were others, Tacitus, Herodotus, others that wrote during these times. But Josephus describes it, and he said, talking about when Titus sacked Jerusalem and tore down the temple, he said, as soon as the army had no more people to slay or to plunder, Caesar gave orders that they should now demolish the entire city and temple. So when there's nobody else to kill, they tore it all down, right? That's what happened. You want to talk about destruction.
Yeah.
It was horrific. And they were so glorious. These buildings were so dominating and massively beautiful. They were beyond comprehension for you and me, right? It's not just some nice little church building. This is a massive complex. And when the Romans were so angry at the Jews at this point in AD 70, that when there wasn't anybody else to kill, then they just started knocking everything down, right? It's pretty crazy.
Yeah, and Jesus predicted it.
Yeah,
and,
he said it would happen.
Yeah, and so
they couldn't have fathomed it.
So now today, that section of the wall that still stands is known as the Wailing Wall, right? And it's another term too, Wailing Wall, and then what else? They call it something else. There's another term for it.
Yeah.
Anyway, but the Wailing Wall is the last wall there, and you can see the different stones, right?
Part of that retaining wall.
Yes.
That was there. So it's not part of the temple walls that Jesus had to be torn down.
Yeah.
It's part of the retaining wall.
I'm just saying right now it's the most sacred part
it's the only thing that it's even attached or even close to what was the ancient temple.
Yeah. And so right now, if you were to go see that wall today, they take prayers and they write them.
Yeah.
And they roll them up and they stick them in the cracks between the bricks of the wall, of the stones.
I did that.
Yeah.
Yeah. When we were there, I got a piece of paper and prayed for the nations and rolled it up, stuck it in there. It's kind of a meaningful thing, but you have so many. They have a men's section and a women's section, and so many people just grieving over the fact that the temple is not built yet, grieving over the fact that they still don't have the freedom that they're looking for and the prosperity that they're praying for, looking forward to the Messiah because they don't know that Jesus has come. Those kinds of things, and yeah, it's a very moving place to be.
Yeah, the Western Wall.
Western Wall.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking of in my mind.
Yeah, the Jewish people do not call it the Wailing Wall.
Right.
Correct. So they call it the Western Wall. Mm-hmm. So then, Jesus is sitting there on the Mount of Olives, and he's sitting exactly where Zechariah said the Messiah would sit, right? When he came to establish his kingdom. And this is when they begin to go, so what's going to happen at the end? Because I think they're aware that the end is coming for Jesus. He's told them several times, I'm going to die. I think they're starting to wrap their heads around it. And of course, yesterday, he's going off, or 2 days ago, he's going off telling off the Pharisees. So clearly he's about to die,
right?
Right. But they also kind of have an understanding. Hey, what's it going to be like when you come back? So it's interesting. They didn't believe in the resurrection entirely. They didn't understand that he rose from the dead. Remember, and yet they had an idea that he would come back someday. And so I think we all tend to be a little confused with our theology. We become a little confused with. We know individual details, and we have a hard time putting them all together. Right? Mm-hmm. Maybe our listeners are that way. I feel that way sometimes. I know all these things about the Bible, but sometimes I have a hard time putting them together. And it feels like to me, the fact that they're asking, what's it going to be like when you come back?
Right.
Means they believe he's coming back.
Right.
But then they're surprised by the resurrection, which is a weird thing, right?
Right. Because it says they didn't even remember his words.
Right.
Like it literally tells us that nobody understood.
Right.
Right. He predicted his own death, burial, and resurrection, and nobody understood it until after the resurrection.
Right.
So we know that.
Right.
So yeah, but I think maybe in these moments, maybe they were bypassing the death part of it because he's speaking about things in the future as if he's as he's seeing the future, right?
Right.
So maybe they're thinking like, hey, you'll be there at the end of the world. Mm-hmm. You'll be there. Obviously, you're going to be there because you're talking about it, right?
Right.
So maybe they just sort of took the death, burial, and resurrection and just put it out of their mind, maybe.
And so then he says, hey, there's going to be wars. There's going to be rumors of wars and threats of wars. And there's going to be nation will go to war against nation, kingdom against kingdom.
Earthquakes.
There'll be famines and earthquakes.
Yeah.
And a lot of people who spend a lot of time reading these things are like, look how wicked America has gotten. Mm-hmm. Look at these wars America keeps getting themselves into. Mm-hmm. And just to be clear, God is not measuring his return by what's happening in America.
Yeah, right.
America didn't even exist when Jesus was talking about this, right?
Right.
So he's not looking at how bad America is and deciding, okay, all right, they crossed the line, I'm coming back.
Right.
So he's taking in the entire world globally, the whole thing becoming more and more evil, more and more devastating. And then he talks about there'll be persecution during that time. And I think we're seeing more persecution now. The 20th century had more martyrs than at any other time, maybe in all of history combined up to that point. And then now here we are in the 21st century, and it's getting rougher and rougher. I just told you a moment ago, I just received a message about one of my dear friends who is a key church planter, responsible for thousands of church plants in a country where it's against the law to share the gospel, and he just got arrested today. Just before we started this podcast.
You literally read the notification right before we started filming.
They raided his office, and I don't even know what the news is right now. But here's a young man, maybe 35, brilliant PhD, leading thousands and thousands and thousands of people to Jesus.
Married with a family?
Married, brand new family, and just recently married. And he's laying it on the line and risking everything all day, every day for the sake of God's kingdom. While I'm trying to figure out, I wonder if I'm going to have time to stop at McDonald's on the way home.
Right.
And he's just laying it on the line all the time. And they just kicked down his doors and arrested him. I don't know anything else. I just got it. So that kind of persecution is going to become more and more and more, right? So you want to see Jesus come back? That's also what you're looking forward to, is more persecution, more struggle. It's going to be really, really difficult. And then he says, it would, in fact, unless that time of calamity is shortened and not a single person will survive, it's going to get that bad.
Yeah.
Right? But it will be shortened for the sake of God's chosen ones. So God's going to hold back. It won't get as bad as you think it's going to be, right? God will hold it back a little bit. But he tells us these things not to scare us. So when we look at these things, you just read them on the surface and you don't get to the end of this chapter and you don't get to the end of the book of Revelation. It's scary stuff. But God doesn't tell us these things to scare us. God tells us these things to let us know he's in control, right? That God wins. And so we have to lean in going, hey, God's already got this worked out. He already knows. And he's coming back to rescue us from the fact that nations are going to war, from the fact that famine's happening, from the fact that all these bad things. It's not that God's making these things happen. It's the fact that they are happening, that the world is literally coming apart as it seems. And unless God intervenes, which he says he will, unless God intervenes, everybody's going to die. But instead, God steps in and he's going to stop this thing. And so you wonder why. Why is he waiting so long? Peter says God's not willing that any would perish, but that all would come to repentance. He's not being slow in his promises, is what Peter says. He just wants everybody to have their chance. And then what does it say? We'll talk about this in one of the other ones. But here in Matthew, it literally says that this isn't going to happen until everyone has had the opportunity to hear, right? From every nation, every language group.
I find it interesting that he says, he describes famines and earthquakes, and then he says, but this is only the first part of the birth pains with more to come. And it's hard to measure, decades, right? From our perspective, we think it's our lifetime. From where God sits, it's been 2,000 years or more. And it's hard to, feel like maybe this is the time, this is the decade. Or it could be 5,000 years. Who knows, right?
Yeah, you don't know.
So I told you I've been watching The Chosen. I just got done with it, and The Chosen again is there's a lot of things on there where they just take liberty of trying to unpack what it could have been like, right? So it's not straight gospel, but I enjoy it very much. But in that episode, Jesus talks about the word soon, and so he says, "Soon, my time will soon come." And then when other people use it, Jesus himself looked at his disciples and he shook his head and he laughed. And he goes, soon. He goes, there's that word again. He goes, it could mean so many things. He said, an hour, a day, a week, a year, 10 years. Yeah. He goes, what could it mean? And I thought, that's interesting, right? Because even when, when they were talking about Jesus coming back, the disciples were convinced that it was during their lifetime, right? So they thought the second coming was happening during their lifetime. And so here it is thousands of years later. And then those of us who are looking at the times, every decade that goes by seems to get a little worse and a little worse.
It's closer to the end than it is to the beginning.
That's correct. Right. So people are like, well, then
so you can round up.
Right. Right. So people are like, it's my lifetime. Right.
Yeah.
And then yesterday I went and I visited somebody at the hospital, and it was a family that I love. And it was actually the granddaughter of this family that I'm friends with. And obviously I'm friends with the daughter as well. And her husband. So we go to pray over this baby, just this infant baby, 14 months. And as I'm praying, I pray for healing and all these things. And I use the word soon. And I said, we pray that you'll heal her sooner rather than later. And I get done with my prayer. And as I'm walking out the door, I say, we're gonna hope and pray that this healing comes sooner rather than later. And then I thought about The Chosen. I thought about Jesus describing this word soon. And I said, soon, I said, soon, not as in like years. And I said, not as in months. I said, not even weeks. I said, we're going to pray sooner than that. And she said, and the mom said, I'm in agreement with that.
Yeah. Good.
Yeah.
Well, that's it, man. So we're going to keep unpacking this. And so if we didn't talk about your favorite thing in this one, we have 2 more chances to do it, because we're going to read through over the next 5 days or so. We're going to cover all the rest of these passages that talk about it in the second half of this passage in Matthew. Then we'll go on to a couple in Mark and then in Luke.
There you go. Yeah. So we'll see you next time on The Bible Guys.